Do you have any?
Yeah, sorry, I just have to give permission to my vice to share.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, yes.
we got it.
Yes. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Very good, Ojonimi. You have 40 minutes.
All right, thank you. So my topic is are mass shootings the results of weak social bonds. So what's initiated this research was I took a class during my first semester of my PhD program. And so the instruct based on criminological theories, and the instructor asked us to like think about a research question, we want to use the theories to examine. And this was the topic that came to my mind because considering I'm an international student in the US, coming to classrooms and whereby once you enter classroom, you close the door. I was really curious about like why that was a practice until like I getting insight into like, okay, because of security wise, because of issues of like school shooting and the rest, that is why they have that security measure in place. So using this, I used some criminological theories to like examine the phenomenon of mass shooting in the US. So I have here my content from the introduction, basically where I'll talk about like how mass shooting is defined, that's the objective of the study, why I decided to like examine the study, then the associated statistics associated with mass shooting in the US. Then I'll also dive into like setting like patterns. This is where I make reference to like setting examples of mass shooters and their background basically. Then after that, I'll be talking about theoretical explanations regarding like I'm using two theoretical perspective, the social bond theory of Travis Hershey and differential association. I choose the social bond because kind of indicative in the topic itself. And for that, my advisor actually was skeptical about it. He was like, most times when people use social bond theory, typically use it in juvenile delinquency and not for like more serious crimes. So thereafter, I will talk about the findings, the common patterns I discover from like the mass shooters and like other literatures, what the common pattern that typically happens in each of these scenarios, and then my suggestion for like further research and like analysis. So starting off with the introduction, going back to like Durkheim's discussion on how he examines crime, which is considered to be like a common um, event in every society. Basically, it's common for societies to like engage, people in different societies to engage in like criminal activities. But when it becomes problematic, is whereby there's like a significant surge in this criminal activity or like this form of disorderliness, because then it kind of shakes the fabric of social order in that society. And so mass shooting is one of such events whereby it has gone to like a pathological level whereby it's more rampant than one would expect. Now, according to the FBI, the US FBI, define mass shooting as any incident that involves the injury or the death of four or more people, and this involves like the use of a gun. And there's several research that have examined the aspect of like mass shooting in the US, and most of them point to the aspect of like lax gun control policies, whereby it's easy for anyone to like have access to a rifle, to a weapon, or to like any um, um, equipment basically. Like it's much easier to like have access to go without like background checks. There are a lot of like pointing fingers towards some of the some policies, and there are issues regarding okay it being a constitutional right, having access to firearms, and the issue of like okay with too much weapons and too very and making it very easy for people to have access to this weapon, it could also result into like more incidents of domestic but mass shooting. Now, for the objective of the study, now why mass shooting, like other crime, results from multitude of social of different issues? Last, you could attribute to gun control policies, other societal factors. Social bond and other social control play a crucial role in examining the phenomenon across the US. That was looking at social bonds and how basically the attachment, how people form attachment in society, and how that explains like issues of mass shooting. Therefore, this paper explores various theoretical perspectives to examine the impact of various forms of social detachment on crime, then based on the instances and people who have get involved in mass shooting, they want to look at the aspect of how attached are they basically to society. And one of the questions that guides it is the presence of the absence of social bond. Does it pose as potential stressor for mass shooting? And do the social attachments would they potentially prevent mass shooting from occurring? That's would stronger social bond result into like less prevalence of mass shooting? What kind of impact does it have basically in mitigating a mass shooting incident? Right here, I have the statistics regarding mass shooting in the US, and this is going from the gun violence archives, and they've noticed since 2015, over 19,000 people have been shot and wounded or killed in the mass shooting. And in 2020 alone, over 600 people were killed through gun violence, with over 200 and 2,700 wounded. Now, if you look at the graph, you see from 1982, they were isolated events where you have like one, some years, zero. But like from 2016, it has mostly stayed in the high side from 11 to 12, and from like 2022 to 2020, from like 2021 and 2022, it had 12. Like when I was checking like current data regarding mass shooting as of yesterday, I'm still in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I discovered like 3 days ago there was actually an instance of mass shooting. That was mind blowing when I checked it out. So that's how prevalent mass shooting occurs, which makes it like a significant issue to like really look into like why these high figures in terms of mass shooting. Because these figures just like in terms of like 12 incidents, they just indicate the number of times this mass shooting has occurred. It does not indicate how many people get involved. There are some situations whereby 12 people are injured, 12 people are killed, various statistics regarding like how many people are recorded as fatal outcome of this incidents. Now, for a lot of mass shooting incidents, typically they usually occur in public spaces, in businesses, in schools, with schools having the most attraction regarding like elementary schools, which kids are more predisposed to be like victims of mass shooting incidents. And for like businesses, they account for like 73% of mass shooting, while for schools accounts for like 39% of mass shooting incidents in the US. And because of this, a lot of times it's been argued that mass shooters typically target public spaces because that's where it's more likely for them to have more victims of basically record more casualties of mass shooting incidents. Now I'll be sharing like three real life stories about mass shooters, and the first to be on Elliot Rogers. He was involved in the Isla Vista mass shooting that occurred near University of California, Santa Barbara in 2014. He was reported to have exhibited deep feelings of social alienation and resentment towards his peers, especially regarding romantic relationship. And with this, it was also discovered that after the fact of him performing this mass shooting, that he posted several videos and he manifested things isolation, frustration, and sense of inadequacy. Basically, there was a lot of history regarding him feeling inadequate or feeling left out, feeling isolated from society. And this one of the background information in terms of like how his feeling of isolation influenced his decisions to like involve in like perpetrate mass shooting basically, which resulted in the casualty of a certain number of people. Now the second example I'll be looking at will be Adam Lanza, which is involved in the Sander Hook mass shooting. Now Sander Hook is an elementary school shooting which happened in 2012. So like going back to when I talked about like mass shooting taking place usually in public setting. But this it occurred in an elementary school. And when I checked his picture yesterday, his picture by just looking at him, it didn't exactly look threatening or someone who will be capable of like perpetrating that kind of crime. Now, Lazarus perpetrated the Sandra Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012. It was discovered that he had a long history of social and psychological struggle. He lived in social isolation, similar to the first example I cited, and had limited connections outside his immediate family. That is, he had less family ties. He had less friends. Most of his immediate ties to like the social was based on his family. Basically, had only his family as his friends. Lala struggled with mental health issues, including autism spectrum disorder and sensory processing disorder. He became progressively isolated over time, withdrawing from school interactions with peers, family, and the community. His lack of connection and his mother's lack of success in integrating into the school or community activity worsened his detachment. Now, from Lazarus' story, you could see the system whereby they are unable to successfully integrate, or Lazarus unable to successfully integrate into society, whereby he has issues with terms of like having friends or like building like social connections with like people within this age group, within this community, and within like social gathering. Now, for the third person I'm talking about will be Nicholas Cruz, which was involved in the Parkland shooting in 2018. Now, Nicholas Cruz, the shooter in 2018, murdered Stonewall Douglas High School. This is under high school incidents. Had a history of disciplinary problems, was expelled from school, was largely alienated from his peers. He was adopted and later lost both adoptive parents, which likely compounded his feeling of isolation and abandonment. Now, for the two previous examples already cited, I talked about how they had issues in terms of like building like social connection, having friends. But Nicholas, even in the considering like he was in the foster care system, upon even getting adopted, he still had issues whereby his foster parent, he lost both foster parents, which further compounded his ability to like actually integrate and find social connection with the community in which he belonged. Now, due to his unstable house life, that he was frequently exposed to bullying and subsequent social isolation, feeling which also followed his feeling of resentment, basically became more resentful of like his community because he was unable to like adapt to like social activity and build social connection with individuals in this setting. His behavioral issue went largely unaddressed by school and mental health support system, which is something that we'll see across all the previous two example of mass shooters, whereby a lot of times they get neglected. When looking at their pictures, you see they don't just ordinarily looking at them, you would not suspect that this were capable of doing um, such a crime. But based on different like issues regarding their poor integrations into the society, their inability to like form like social bonds with their peers, their community, that's fostered a feeling of resentment in terms of like committing the crime they did. Now, looking at the theory and the for the sociological aspect of it, going back to like Hershey's discussion regarding juvenile delinquency, which for this aspect it's no longer juvenile delinquency, it's a much heightened crime. So for this, I'm looking at it considering how Hershey looked at social bond as a potential way of mitigating deviance among juveniles. Now, for Hershey's social bond theory, it claims that four models of integration, attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief can strengthen the quality of social bond. Basically, to like prevent juvenile delinquency for Hershey, he prescribed like following these four modes of encouraging attachment. And from this aspect of Hershey's perspective, I'm looking at it in terms of like the perpetrators of mass shooting and how the social bond theory can be used to explain their likelihood of like committing these crimes. Because using Hershey's beyond just juvenile delinquency also illustrates that people who do not have this kind of social attachment to the community in which they belong to at, it encourages the feeling of them feeling resentful towards these communities and them lashing out as these three individuals, among others, have done committing this mass shooting. Now, one of the example of across all of the modes of attachment for encouraging social bond as Herschel discussed. The attachment is one of the most popular aspects of it, and that's where I'm actually focused on in terms of like how these individuals, how people are successfully attached to the society, in terms of like the friendship network, the community, how attached are they to the society? Are they involved in like certain activities, certain communities or certain groups that kind of solidifies their form of attachment to the society? Because being attached to society influences one's ability to like develop empathy and concern for the members of the society and other communities in which they belong. Now, because once one is attached to, let's say, like a particular religious group or a particular like friendship network, they are more likely going to have empathy towards their members. They are going to be concerned about like their well-being, their welfare, and they are less likely to like result into like harmful practices that puts these members into like harm's way or potentially like kill these individuals, these members of this group. Now, it is noteworthy that perpetrators of mass typically, particularly school shootings, typically exhibit little or no empathy for their victims, who are often members of various groups, organizations, such as schools and communities that they themselves frequent as members. Now, a lot of instances of mass shooters, it typically occurs in places they frequent either the schools they attend or the workplace, the place of work in which like they are gainfully employed. Now, for this, for like the three examples I cited, places where carried out this their mass shooting and places they are frequent as individuals, but based on the attachment theory, would say that based on this aspect that they were able to like perform this heinous crime, it suggests that they really developed that kind of attachment as one would expect in terms of like having a connection with these groups or with this environment, like social gatherings like schools and the workplace in which a lot of this mass shooting occur. Now, on that way of looking at a mass shooting pass from the fact that okay, they also develop resentments towards their communities and the group in which they are surrounded with. It's also the idea of suicide by cop. Now, in considering that the mass shooters tend to either take their own lives or present themselves in a way that leads law enforcement to kill them during their violent attacks, this suggests that mass shooters or mass murderers of shooters exhibit suicidal tendency. There's a good example of this with Charles Andy, which is the shooter of the Santana High Schools, also in California, who relied on the police for suicide by cop. Basically, for a lot of the instances of mass shooters, they typically there there's really there are very few instances whereby they have like getaway cars or they intend to abscond from when after they've committed this crime. We suggest that most of the time they consider like suicide by cop as their only way out of the frustration or resentment they have towards their society. So it's more like a situation whereby they have a resentment towards their society, and in order to like um release this frustration, there's really no out in terms of like, oh, just committing suicide. So they kind of like transfer that responsibility towards the cop. So they put like the activities are kind of portrayed in a way by it's much easier for the cop to like actually like respond by like killing them in the course of this their violent crime, committing this violent crime. Now, by being suicidal, one can infer that motives of mass shooters stem from a lack of integration and a sense of alienation from society. That's whereby people do not feel a form of attachment to society. Going back to Durkheim's discussion about suicide and suicide rates in terms of like level of integration, like how integrated are these individuals in society. Now, so much integration that comes with its own issues with lack of integration, whereby people do not have this kind of attachment with this community, which makes it much easier for them to like lash out as members at these groups. Now, due to this low integration, this perpetration results to suicidal acts in response to their status frustration and alienation. Now, building on this the aspect of social attachment. Now, due to the aspect whereby these individuals have like the inability to like build friendship networks, even build romantic relationship, it causes like kind of like friction in terms of like their inability to like attain a particular kind of status in society, whereby they are unable to like be that cool kid in class or in school, or be that co-work work colleague at work. So like in this situation, based on this friction in terms of like they're unable to like get involved or get well integrated into like this communities or this particular groups or businesses, as the case may be, they use this it results into like a status frustration and a sense of alienation where they feel a sense of no belonging basically. And this is where it results into like encourages them to like result into like suicide by cop method in terms of like lashing out. Now, the second theory I'll be looking at the differential association. Basically, this looks at it from the aspect whereby being in close proximity to like certain individuals who exhibit like criminal tendency or criminal or criminally inclined. This also has an influence in how it affects how they are integrated into society. Basically, if one is in a particular environment or social setting where people he's being befriended by either by people that are formerly incarcerated or people who engage in criminal activity. This has an influence in terms of influencing how they're able to like cope with like status frustration and how they're able to like cope with like their inability to integrate into the society. Basically, they're going to use the form of like mass shooting as a way of like gaining like some form of satisfaction as a kind of response to like their frustration towards their inability to integrate or to like form attachment within society. And therefore, the kinds of behavioral patterns exhibited in each of these institutions inform the emotional and behavioral nature of individuals. Now, across all of the examples in terms of like the mass shooters, like especially for the three I made reference to, they share common attributes. First, a lot of them usually are within the ages of 18 to 29. They're usually young adults. Most mass shooters are male. They're very isolated situation whereby like they're female or I think one of the instances of them being of a female being part of the mass shooter was in 2014, where it was a couple, basically man and woman, who were involved in the mass shooting, their business center. Now, mass shooters also typically have history of being bullied. So from like the Sandler Hook shooting of the elementary school, there were instances whereby there were records whereby he was being a victim of being bullied, and considering how much bullying is a common issue in the States for high school students, this has an impact in terms of like how they are able to like integrate into this like groups or these institutions. Like the school considered to be like one of the major aspects in terms of like integrating individuals into to society, whereby individuals in this system are being bullied or unable to like integrate or like form attachment within this institution because it results in like status frustration. Now, the fourth finding was alienation in the workplace and social life reduces opportunity for healthy social interaction, making it challenging to form supportive networks which could otherwise mitigate violent inclination. Now, on that aspect, the major finding is the inability of these individuals to like integrate into the workplace, the social life of these institutions, either through the workforce, either through the schools and these organizations in which they frequent, whereby they have inability to like integrate or to like form attachments with members of this uh, organization. It results into like high tendency of them lashing out to result into like a mass shooting. And due to this inability of forming this attachment, it makes it much difficult for these institutions that are typically able to like prevent mass shooting to have that kind of effect. Because going back to like we're looking at social different forms of social control, typically the formal social control for mass shooting is definitely if one is committing a crime, they are going to be arrested and face like different legal consequences. Now, obviously, that is not working in terms of like how prevalent mass shooting is still working. So one would expect like informal social controls like the family, the primary, like other informal organizations where people are able to like form attachment to step forward, step up to this responsibility. But whereby individuals feel alienated from this primary source of integration, it increases their tendency to like result into like this violent outburst. Now, across the literature review so far and like the two theoretical perspective I examined, there are two aspects that I'm interested in terms of like further research on the incident of mass shooting. The first has to do like examine how men are socialized into masculinity. And this considering the fact that most mass shooters are typically male and focusing on how family and societal pressure in terms of like going back to like the issue of like status frustration, how the inability to like attain certain like status within society has influence in terms of like exacerbating like mass shooting incidents. Now, the second aspect for that research also is analyzing how modern shift in terms of like gender expectation and gender roles creates cumulative strength for men trying to balance traditional and contemporary roles. Now, considering the fact of like certain stereotypical in terms of like what it is to be a man, and considering like more modern views of gender equality and how they're able to like reconcile both expectation of masculinity, is going to be like how this impacts the prevalence of mass shooting, and how this can also like influence further discussion about how it influences that violent tendency or result to much reduction in mass shooting incidents. So there's a need to explore this relationship regarding cumulative stress from involving gender roles and how masculinity is being um, portrayed in modern society. Now, for my conclusion, now case analysis on individuals like Alan Lazar highlight how weak societal integration, such as frequent changes in school and lack of consistent community ties, can exacerbate tendency towards violence in those already experiencing mental health issues. Like I made reference to, like he already had issues with autism. Now that's another aspect that already affects his means of social connection and social relations with people, his peers, and with people in different groups in which he frequents. Now, due to the fact that this already exists in terms of like mental health, like how like other aspects in terms of like integration, such as how they're able to like build like social network within these various groups in which they frequent, like the school, their community members. This also like increases the propensity for them to like resort to like violent outbursts. Now, Lazarus' life exemplifies anomic conditions where constant changes and lack of stable social connection contributed to his estrangement, basically due to like inability of being attached to a particular social group, whereby he's in one school and he's been taken away from that school to another school. It prevents him to like really have like close connection, a close attachment to individuals in those community and build meaningful social bonds with this individual. Yeah, thank you for your attention, questions and suggestions. Thank you.
I really loved your work. In fact, um, even though we have always heard about mass shootings, especially here, always when there is a mass shooting in United States, it's the first
Mm,
news here in Brazil. And it's kind of interesting because Rio de Janeiro tends to be really violent. And even though we are violent, there is much violence in Rio de Janeiro. We don't see much mass shootings, this specific phenomenon,
mm,
right? So it's quite interesting, even though it's a very sad topic, but it's quite interesting to understand sociologically something else inside violence because the sociology of violence is too big. And I'm not going to talk too much. I have my notes, but I'm going to be the last one. If anyone wants to make a comment.
I guess first it would be good if we could lock the screen, the PowerPoint presentation, so that we can see each other.
Okay, I should stop sharing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Good. Andrew, you got the word?
Okay. Thanks very much. This was an interesting presentation indeed. you raised some complicated questions, and it does seem to be something that's unique to the United States. I mean, you don't have too many mass shootings in Europe, right? I mean, you have killings, right? You have the occasional terrorist events, right? But you don't have people shooting each other simply because they want to. There was even an odd expression that came into use back in the 1970s, 1980s, going postal. You know what the expression going postal means?
Yeah.
There was a mass shooting at a post office. You know, an employee of a post office, something had happened at work, and he decided that before he was going to get fired, he was going to get even with everybody. And so he went to work one day, you know, showed up with a gun and shot a number of his, you know, colleagues. And this happened in another postal working setting. I'm talking about employees, right? I'm not talking about people who are in the post office. And this happened several times. And so the notion of a mass shooting, or the notion of killing somebody simply because you had a bad day at work, was going to show them what it was all about. Well, that became known as going postal because you were mimicking the employee of the United States Postal Service. Yeah, the United States is a very violent place, right? You know, there are other violent countries, but and certainly the United States doesn't have a monopoly on it. But you know, I watch movies to pass the time. You know, say from the 1950s, 1960s, right? Made in the United States, or television series made in the United States. Everybody has a gun. You know, people have guns at work. You know, people go to work in an office. You know, they're sometimes secretaries, sometimes they're executives. They have guns in their desk drawers. You know, people have guns in their automobiles. They drive around with guns in their cars. And you know, this gives an entirely, it's almost encouraged social behavior to be able to act out on your violence in an odd kind of a way. People are, of course, disturbed when, you know, 15 or 20 school children get shot, you know, or 4 or 5 people in a grocery store get shot. But very little is done to prevent it. And the discussion has changed, of course, over the last 40 years as well. It used to be a discussion of gun control. Now it's a discourse of gun rights. You know, people have rights to have guns, and that has to be protected in, you know, in some way. So, I mean, I have too many questions to ask. Maybe I should just stop for the moment with that statement and give somebody else a chance to talk, because this is you raise a lot of interesting and disturbing questions about, you know, life in the United States. And thanks.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Ojonimi, and also Andrew. I really like it. I think it's a really good paper, and it's really important today. And I'm afraid it's getting more and more important, especially because it is about the United States, and it's a special thing with the United States, I'm afraid, also because in Canada people have weapons, guns. They don't shoot each other. In Norway, it's normal that people living in the north have guns. They don't shoot each other. It's totally, so it's the question, why is this a special case in the United States? And I was thinking about, I really like your idea first coming up with Durkheim, coming up and then having the idea of pathology, where we might discuss a little bit later, but then with the suicide, and binding this up later also with mass shooting as a suicide, as a prolonged suicide. So I think this is a pretty interesting, smart way to go. The question I thought about was, is it really, what kind of pathology is it within the United States? If it's something special there, has it something to do with the zeitgeist, something to do was really speaks for the United States, which might also has changed in the years. We see now it's getting more and more authoritarian, more and more using of violence. Also, the individuality, that's why it's also especially the sociological case when we have the subgroups, gangs, which you also tackled with Matsueda a little bit. So I think that that's a very good question. But when they have subgroups, did you also maybe think about if it's physical subgroups? Is it imagined groups? Like Breivik, for example, with this kind of white supremacy group where he has a kind of a virtual group. So it's a question, does it have to be a physical group? Is it also maybe a digital imagined group, which is maybe there, but we can't see it? And then the thing of this really other indicators that there is also a shifting in the society, a shifting in the mass shooting over the course of the, let's say, history of mass shooting. That would be also very interesting. Who is doing this? So with this social pathology, I'm not sure about. This is a special case in the United States, that it's a kind of freedom and the maybe wrong idea what freedom is and what so individuality is. So it's a question if it's really pathology or if it's a special feature of the idea of thinking of freedom in the United States and the freedom of guns and so ever, combined with let's see, hatred of white people over others now, which is now coming more up with Trump. But I have the same question. I could now talk for. Oh, I have one question. You have this, I think it was good to statistic and the real life stories, but do you have also another kind of methodology? Do you have also maybe interviews with people being at mass shootings, or maybe are there also interviews or diaries maybe of people who committed mass shootings and survived, and so are there no insights of the people who done it really, or where do you get the source data from?
Yeah, like one of the examples I cited, he actually had a diary.
Okay.
So like yeah, he actually had a diary. So I think I'll probably check on how to like have whether the diary is somewhere online where I could actually see.
But that's okay. It's just interesting. I think diaries is a very interesting research source.
Vesela, you have the word.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation, and so much, on the top of the wave, so to say. So important thing for society in this particular time. And I really, as Dirk said, I also appreciate very much this interesting idea to connect Durkheim with the idea of suicide, and this is the new type of suicide that we can see in society nowadays, which also is interesting. So people, perhaps this can be connected also with this kind of masculinity that problem that you want to perhaps touch in the future, because maybe people do not have the courage, so to say, to commit suicide today, but they prefer to provoke something, the police, for example, to shoot them, as if really this has something to do with masculinity, weak people who want to drag other people also with them, when they decide that they have to go. So this is extremely interesting question. This is the one question. Then I was thinking that it is also, I found this very interesting in your study. Maybe you can interpret it a little bit. I mean, this age group. So this is something that is extremely interesting. 18 to 29. Who are these people? These are people who are already not teenagers. They're getting out of this group, and they are in the so to say, in the not middle of life, but in front of them, there are a lot of closed doors. Perhaps they want to enter society because they're not children anymore. And so when we talk about the role of the family, I mean, we cannot extend the family endlessly. The family is a concept that normally, and maybe this is the difference in Europe, you know, the family is something that, I mean, you can be a child until 17, 18, but not anymore. And then you leave and that's it. So you're not a child anymore, you take care of yourself. As far as I know, so I have followed some of the statistics in family issues in the United States, and I saw that there is a kind of tendency children to go back to live with their parents, while before they were more eager to leave their families and to go in the wide world and to have careers and do whatever they want free. But now, because of the economic situation, maybe because it's so expensive, living costs are very expensive, and so they children began to go back to live with their parents, which also is a kind of a sign of weakness, you know, because they cannot manage with the big world. They cannot, you know, have, even they say that people do not have the same kind of opportunity to get rich as their parents. You know, perhaps the opportunities are not so big. And or perhaps, you know, this generation has consumed, so to say, the resources and the space, you know, so there is much less freedom for these young people, less perhaps places for employment, and it's more, there are a lot of doors before the employment. So you have to have a lot of education. Education is very expensive and so on and so forth. And so there are a lot of obstacles and boundaries, or you know, which actually create great obstacles for people to get into this life and to start, you know, having families and so on. And so this is exactly this boundary. 18, you get out of the family, and then you are on your own. If you have, for example, a wife or a man next to you, children, maybe you have a family, but you have to have also income. You have to be employed. So this is a crucial period in the life of these young people. And so maybe you can focus a little bit more on this, you know, very interesting fact that you have. Read a little bit and say something about the specificity of the American society. Because in the United States, it's also interesting to talk about the model of, you know, the sociological model, because in the United States, the state, so to say, is up there, you know, and the family is very important. But what kind of family? After people 18, 19 years of age, you know, this is not the family that's supposed to take care of you. But the states, you know, when we talk about the social security and also healthcare, the state is a little bit, you know, withdrawn. So there is no such kind of welfare status in Europe, and you're on your own. And so it is very difficult for these young people in this group, age group, to manage with the, you know, all the problems of life that they face. They have education maybe, so, but, you know, how can you find the right, you know, employment? So maybe you here, you know, you have to have network. Maybe here you have to, you know, have friends and so on and so forth. And those who do not have this kind of network, they, you know, left in this kind of, you know, empty space. You know, they are not children. They cannot be full members of the family, but they also are not in society because they are not employed. So this is a very interesting topic, I think, and you can explore it a little bit more and say perhaps something about this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so I wanted to, what else I have here? Yeah, I also think that, yeah, this gun control, gun rights, you know, this is very interesting topic. I mean, we have a definition in sociology of what the nation state is. And this definition says that we have monopoly. The state has monopoly over the means of violence. And the gun right means that you have the right to protect yourself. But then what about the state? The state, the function of the state, so to say, is compromised. And so we are here, you know, talking about one state that, so to say, is not organized as the other states, and it doesn't correspond anymore to the definition of nation state. It's not a nation state then. It's perhaps something else, which is interesting. Yeah, so the statistic is really horrible. And yeah, the last thing that I wanted to say, maybe, so Dirk said something very interesting also about type of relationships today. That how do we bond? Can we bond on the internet? Can we bond on chat groups and so bonding perhaps is something that requires face to face. So I think that this is absolutely crucial here to see what is so important about face to face and why exactly the whole world cannot become just online. We have to have a kind of physical contact, which is very important, but also globalization. I mean, globalization also means that the cliffs, the polarization of society is bigger. There are many very, very rich people and very, very poor, and then there is, in between them, there is a kind of gap. But globalization actually also makes people from very different cultures and professions and nationality to be mixed up, in a kind of global society where bonds actually, it's very difficult to create bonds. When you have many nationalities, many cultures, many religions, and so on. And maybe another thing that you want to discuss is globalization a factor for the fact that we have societies that have much lower quality of bonding. And it's not by chance that in social psychology, for example, people began talking about the importance of weak ties. Why? Because the strong ties bonding, bonds are already disappearing. And so people began to replace them with weak ties. That's enough. There are articles about this. Oh, it's enough to have weak ties. Just people with whom you can do business and so. But this is not the essential tie that makes you to feel as if you belong someplace. Yeah, so this is it. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you very much.
I hope to see this published. You can pick me if you're going to publish this in our book or someplace. It's very interesting. We have to have this publication.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah.
Andrew?
A couple of comments. This notion of suicide by cop is something that doesn't happen in other places. For instance, one of the most terrible examples of a mass shooting for political reasons, right, occurred in Norway, right? There's this guy Anders Breivik, right? And what did he do? He shot 70 people or something like that. He blew up, half a dozen others with a bomb. He was arrested, right? They took him to court. They tried him, put him in prison, right? In the United States, you can count on a cop trying to shoot you and kill you, shoot repeatedly. But in a lot of European countries, cops don't shoot repeatedly. Cops don't shoot to kill. And so this notion of suicide by cop is it's also unique to the United States. This issue of mass shootings in the United States, it's a question of social practice. It's a question of policing policies. It's a question of how police are trained. One of the largest, perhaps the single largest mass shooting episode occurred some years ago in Las Vegas. This guy rented a hotel room. He brought in many guns and shot out of his hotel room, and must have, I think, at least 500 people were shot. 400, 500 people were shot. But how many were killed and how many were wounded, I don't know. But he shot thousands of rounds from a hotel. Okay, we don't know what was in his mind. We don't know who he was or what he was thinking because they shot him. Right? There's no way. I mean, it's difficult to examine these cases. It's difficult to examine the minds of people when they're shot dead. In an ironic kind of a way, in a sickly ironic kind of a way, mass shootings almost represent a kind of pragmatic solution of your problem. And in a certain sick kind of a way, it's not so much social alienation or breaking social bonds, but stepping forward, you know, solving a problem, taking it into your hands, using your rights, you know, pragmatically pull out your gun and shoot somebody, right? This is strange. It's a strange, strange phenomenon. And I don't understand it, but thank you for discussing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Vicky, please, you have the word.
Hi, everyone. So I think everyone said quite a lot. I feel perhaps the question I'd ask you is, what is your intention for the research? Because the phenomena itself, as everyone has said, is really, really broad. In other words, there are too many variables. So I think you may benefit from kind of narrowing it down, whether that is methodological perspective or by looking at a certain demographic. But I think there needs to be a narrowing down, because otherwise I think you may just find yourself overwhelmed by too much information. The other thing, when it comes to Durkheim, I'm quite curious. In a sense, everyone here has touched on culture. So there's this idea of violence, guns, America, so on and so forth. But I wonder if Durkheim's idea of sacred and profane may be helpful in understanding why guns have become so sacred in the United States. So those are just my two thoughts. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Ojonimi, if you want to answer something, just do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Want to make it.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Thinking about the narrowing down. Yeah, I think that's something I definitely have to look at. And then for the Durkheim aspect of it. Yeah, and for the age group, because even like so I'm taking a class about criminology, and typically like that's usually considered to be like they call it the dangerous class, typically from 18 to 29. That's where it's more likely prosecutors are more likely to like push for sentencing opposed to someone who is younger or someone who is less in his 40s or 50s. So like that age group is also a very good pattern to look at. For the narrowing down, I know you've made mention about like in terms of methodological or I think narrowing. What do you mean by that?
I mean, whether you are looking at it statistically,
Yes.
whether you are, I mean, I think Dirk said this about using diaries. I think that's great if you have access to it.
Mhm.
Right now, as I see it, as interesting as the phenomena is, you just have so many variables that can explain these outcomes. And until you kind of contain it, I don't think your study will have that kind of validity, right? So from that point of view, like, for example, you know, one can also say that post-COVID in the United States, right, suicide rates for people under 19 or 18, or maybe 25, have gone up by 25%, right? So there are other things going on which may explain what you're talking about: masculinity, right? National identity, gender, masculinity. You have said all of these things. So I think if you just kind of focus on one, you might be able to clarify what the contribution of what you're doing is.
Okay.
I hope that's
Thank
helpful.
you. Yeah, it is.
Brilliant. I'm so glad that I made some topics, but everyone mentioned, and I believe that's the way to go. For many years, violence and violent perpetrators, they have been assessed and analyzed psychologically, right? What was on their minds. And now we have this, what I thought your work is a sociological take on something that has been exclusively psychological so far. So people have given those violent people these individual reasonings, whether it's low dopamine or high dopamine, or if they are, as you've mentioned, you showed a case of someone who was autistic and had some serious mind-related problems. But the thing is, now that we are getting to the sociology of the psychological aspect, that no man is an island, and we need to have social bonds. I have three questions. First of all, wouldn't a differential association be a social bond for the negative side? But wouldn't this be a social bond or a belief or a commitment to perpetrating crimes because you just like, I don't know, you are in the horde, you are just like the other wolves. So if you are in a social group, we know there's many papers about social pressure, peer pressure, you know. When we were all young, our mothers told us about that boy who used drugs or that boy who drink alcohol. So please don't talk to him. Don't, you know. So it's like now that we're seeing this social bond, wouldn't this differential association be another aspect of a social bond for the bad, a social bond for the villains, perhaps? I don't know, but it's it brings me to the same question that I bring myself every day. Do villains know they are villains? Do these mass shooters, they know that they are bad? Perhaps they think they're doing something good. You know, some people kill other people because they believe it's good, because they believe they need to eliminate. And then there is this huge hate thing related that I believe Olga, better than all of us, could mention about emotions, sociology and emotions. And you have the hate, you have the despise, you have, you know, like this, how can I say, um, you would really think that the world would be a better place without these people. We just look at the biggest historical fact of all, which was the Holocaust. So I mean, every day there were like 10 mass shootings during the Holocaust, you know. And today there are people killing other people because they believe it's good. So my question is, we have shaped this mass shooting criteria within sociology based on what happens in the US. Even though they happen in Europe, even though they happen in Australia, even though they happen here in Brazil or in South Africa, we only hear about the mass shooting in schools, mass shooting in shopping malls, mass shooting in airports. And how is this not related to terrorism? I don't know if there is any relation whatsoever to terrorism, because it's a terror. You are inflicting terror upon the others, right? And another thing that came to my attention, I'm sorry if I brought more troubles than the
It's
insights,
fine.
but was about the bullying part. As someone who has been bullied my entire life, but it's good to have social bonds and a positive social network. I could understand the hate and I could understand the emotion. I can understand. Sometimes I talk to myself, if I had a gun, something bad would have happened. So it's good that in Brazil we don't buy guns at Walmart. When I was 19, I went to the United States, to Alaska. I lived there. I entered Walmart, and there was like this entire wall made of guns. And I went to work in a summer camp with children aged between 8 and 12 years old, and we had to teach them riflery. So it was like, why are these people teaching riflery to children? Why aren't these children eating dirt, you know, and getting dirty and running, you know, behind each other and hiding seek or something else? Why do we have to teach them riflery? I was against. I did not touch a rifle. I am very hippie. If I were in the 60s, I would put a flower in your gun. That's the thing. So my question is, bullying is a social interaction, as any other interaction, that comes from an emotion. And of course, it's an emotion of power. But it's very interesting because usually what you're saying is that those who inflict mass shooting, they are powerless. They are detached. They are estranged to where they are. I have a question. Have you ever cross-referenced the mass shootings to the places they happen? Like if they were like in high density places, low density places, rural areas, urban areas. Have you ever made this contrast to see if we can find something else? with this cross-reference. I remember I learned how to put votes on a map, and then we could identify why those people voted in those people, you know, because of their social, economical, and cultural aspect of their zones, of their neighborhoods. So my question is, across the United States, have you ever mapped, like on a map, where these mass shootings came from? Or perhaps we can have a relation. I don't know if they are closer to big cities with huge how can I say, underprivileged neighborhoods. You know, here in Brazil we call the favelas. You know, or there you have the slums, or you have the hoods, or you have, I don't know how to call it. You know, sociologically and academically, but I don't know if they happen more there more often or not, you know. So my question is, as Diki said, perhaps she had to leave, as Diki said, you can narrow down, but still make more of this. You can narrow it down, but apply other things, because perhaps we can find out something. This is really, really interesting. This is really interesting. I mean, has it happened more often in New York and California and not in the middle? When we started talking, there is this movie, Kill Bill. You know, Kill Bill is a movie, and they start with a mass shooting in a church during a wedding. And that was all I could think of. There was a mass shooting of a wedding, and the perpetrator was the father of the child, of the mother he killed. So my question is, of course, we have the psychological aspects, but we still have to give attention to the emotional aspects of this mass shooting specifically. You know, are bombers, suicide bombers, mass shooters, you know, and then we go back to the terrorism aspect again. Those are my comments, but congratulations on your work. It's amazing, amazing work.
Hey, thank you very much. And yeah, definitely for the location aspect, and in terms of demography of people who like, that's something to really look out there. Thank you so much.
Dirk, you have the word.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you said something very interesting things, I guess. The space, the social space, I think it might be interesting to look maybe an Henri Lefebvre, the production of social space, and see if there is something connected with social class, maybe also with social space, and let's say no, we go maybe ethnics and so forth and so forth. Who is connected with this? This might be also very interesting. With respect to do they, Umberto, you said, do they shooters know that they are bad or that they are good? I guess there comes the question of alienation. So it's not just a question of alienation like anomie when we talk about Durkheim, when we talk about are we feel recognized, are we bonded enough, but is it how deep, what kind of layers of alienation do we have? What kind of the cultural alienation are coming into this? Because I mean, Lefebvre says the third layer of alienation is when the alienated doesn't even know anymore that he or she is alienated. And then it begins to be interesting. I mean, Durkheim is interesting anomie, but I think it's much more interesting in the capitalist societies we have today, and also in this authoritarian regimes today, that we surely don't think that we are alienated, but the others are all, and this comes. So that means false consciousness might be also a very interesting thing, but maybe not only with culture and with capitalism, but maybe also with violence and other things coming with this individuality. So that might be. But what I'm doing now, and also this thing of terrorism there, what is state terrorism, what is individual terrorism, who defines, who has legitimization to define what is a shooting, what is terrorism, who is on what end, who is causing what. So that might be interesting. But what I'm doing now is working against Dickie's saying, making it even broader. So I think for the first, Vicky it's a shame that she's not here anymore, but I think what is interesting is making it, narrow it down, but also doing this, if you do this, don't lose the connections, because you can show what is connected, but then say, but I'm focusing on something more on these and that, it may be showing this. But I would not do and just focus only on one thing, but maybe seeing the relations, how things are related, because it's really complicated. It would be too easy just to take something, one attitude out of it, and then seeing, okay, this is collected, but I would like to focus on this, because that would be maybe I think a good choice to do, not just only to focus on, but then there we go. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, may I add something? Thank you very much for your presentation. I was very impressed, but I have several words for you and for all of us. First of all, I think we should think about the combination of factors empirically. I agree with the main idea, something going wrong with the social bonds. Yes, you are right, but at the same time, why and what is the combination of factors of mass shooting? Because in concrete society, in America, and for example, we have mass shooting in Russia too, and this number increased from the times of Crimea annexation and this war in Ukraine. Unique factor for example, mass shooting in Russia is violence, state violence, and other social factors. And I agree with the few channels of social mobility, because mass shooting happened usually in towns, not in big cities. And so on and so on. What is the combination of factors empirically? And theoretically, I think I heard something about the Durkheim suicide. It is typical for American sociology to explain the mass shooting with the help of Durkheim suicide behavior. And but I think it's fruitful to think about the other theoretical position, for example, alienation, theories of alienation, and so on. And maybe it will be fruitful for you. And in Russia, we have the cases of mass shooting, but not so great number. But I don't know what it will be in future, because the soldiers are returning from the war to our private areas, and we have some crimes. And for unique factors for Russia, I think, for example, it is the absence of the image of the future. And for young people, it is a tragedy not to imagine their future. And this is a loss of life meaning and so on. It's a very hard situation. And maybe in America, the same situation in some towns, for example, when young people can't see their future. And I think it's a very interesting topic for sociological research, and I wish you good luck with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Actually, you made a couple of points that I was going to do. In the United States, it seems as if the focus is on, for looking for motivations, looking for causes, looking for reasons why these things happen. The focus seems to remain on the individual. It's a bad individual. It's a sick individual. There's some kind of insanity involved or something of the sort, right? Um, uh, it's odd that, okay, in Scandinavia, there are the cultures in many ways focus on individuality, individual rights, identity, individual identity. But there still is a sense that there's a social context for these kinds of things. You know, if someone commits a crime, they need to be helped. They don't need to be punished. Well, they need to be punished too, maybe, but the focus is on helping. You know, you can commit a major crime in Sweden and, you know, spend just a few years in jail, but spend a lot of time talking with social welfare agencies, being trained for jobs, how to reenter society. In the United States, they throw you in jail for 20 years, and there's nothing you can do after that, is there? So this is the interesting thing is that, you know, you're approaching this from a sociological point of view, not just a strictly psychological point of view, which is typical, I think, in many cases for what they do in the States. They don't talk about structural things, they don't talk about social things, or if they talk about social things, they talk about how an individual was somehow damaged by a social context, and so on his own responsibility or her own responsibility, they made a choice and they did this. It's their responsibility, right? That's sort of the focus that you see in the States, not that it's a social issue. No, no. But anyway, thank you very much for bringing us up for a discussion like this in a very sociological kind of context. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your comments.
Just one tiny thing. Your work title is "Are mass shootings caused by the lack of social bonds, weak social bonds?" Right?
Yeah.
And then all throughout your paper, you already state right from the beginning that it is the effect of a weak social bond. And then you use the sociological theories, you know, in order to fundament, to base your belief. You have shown 3 real life cases. You know, you worked like with this method, case by case, real life cases, and you showed that all the 3 of them, they had weak social ties, right? So
Yeah.
my question is, perhaps, as Diki mentioned, that to narrow down and to say what method you're using, I believe it was very much like a theoretical and sociological take on something that was exclusively individual, you know, as Andrew said, as Olga said, right?
Mm.
But at the same time, I wonder if you could use the COVID and the social isolation in your favor for this work. Because as I saw in the statistics, and I believe I saw it right, there
2020.
was an increase after the pandemics, a high increase, because people who were isolated, they became more isolated. And people who weren't isolated, they became isolated. So perhaps if you are trying to fundament and to how can I say, to state categorically, academically, that mass shootings are caused by the weak social bonds, perhaps if you use the COVID-related time since then to now in your favor, it's a good strategy. You know, perhaps you could keep the theories. Theoretical take is amazing, especially for sociology, for something that was exclusively psychological. It's very important, but also using these real life cases. And if you could get more real life cases, you know, perhaps this would be the cherry on top of this very good ice cream that you brought.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
Just a moment. Anyone else? Very good. Ojonimi, I don't know if
Yes.
you... Okay, Dirk, please.
Just to continue or to go a little bit further, what you said, it might be interesting to say maybe a mass shooting and social bonding and social bonds, and then a few examples or something like that, because you can't generalize it anyhow. But it's not only, I think it's a problem when we only deal with it on a sociological thing. I think it also has to be social psychology. You can't do it on psychology because, as Andrew pointed out, it is about what I have here, pain. It's about pain that society causes to individuals. It is about structural. It's a structural and an individual thing. So the thing is. This is a really good thing, Umberto, changing it and just having it as maybe mass shooting and social bonds, and then come with it and result in it, and doing only with this microsociological methodology with examples, because you can't generate it anyhow, generalize it anyhow. But then you can show also the other strings what it also could be. So that it's interesting. But again, this would be again narrowing it down, but also showing all the other effects. Maybe that could be a good idea.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Ojonimi, are you a master's doctorate?
I'm a doctorate. No, this is like my second year, so I'm not yet. I've not done my area exam yet.
Okay, not yet.
No.
But is this your thesis theme? The theme of your thesis?
No, not yet.
It's a part.
Yeah, it's a part.
Oh, okay. We all have
So
things that came exclusive nowadays.
Yeah.
Very good. Could you introduce yourself to us a little bit, because you're new? We all know each other. We have here almost every country in the world, almost. So please, if you could introduce yourself to us a little bit.
Okay, so my name is Ojonimi Salihu. So typically, once you get familiar, I usually end my name with just Nimi, which is the short form of Ojonimi. I'm from Nigeria. I'm an international student studying in the US. So I did my undergrad in Nigeria, then I came to US end of 2020. It was December 2020 to pursue my master's in sociology. I have religious studies background. My undergrad was religious studies. Then I came to the US to study sociology. So after my master, I got done my master's in 2022. Then I worked for a bit. Then 2023, last year, August, I started my PhD program in Western Michigan University. So for my master's program, I was typically interested in crime. Like for my master's thesis, it was based on domestic violence in Illinois. So I was looking at factors contributing to domestic violence. Now for my PhD, luckily for the first semester, my first year facilitator is interested in, his focus is on environmental sociology. So that semester I got the opportunity to work with him with, I think he had something to do like environmental, like resource frontier. So then it also made me interested in environmental sociology as well. So when everyone asks me what's my research interest, now environmental sociology has entered the mix. So it's more, my research interest is more environmental sociology, health inequality, and crime.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Actually, environmental sociology is increasing. I come from environmental sociology, and it's really interesting, the aspect, because when you mention this, we know there is sociology of violence anywhere, but it's very interesting that sociology of violence here in Brazil is within urban sociology, because the sociology of violence for us is an urban fact. It's an urban object. So inside sociology of urban cities, especially here, Rio and São Paulo and Porto Alegre, they have huge research groups and research committees on violence in urban framework. So this is why I asked you about the places. And it was interesting when Olga mentioned, that these happen in towns, not in big cities, right? So why is that? And I believe there is a factor. And other than that, I'm sorry, Dirk, but we have lots and lots of material about psychology and mass shooting, about psychology and violence. Perhaps our duty as sociologists and social scientists would be like to provide sociological material, so in the future we can combine both. But I believe that it is important to found this statement. You know, I think it's important to say this is the sociological take that we have. It's not only sociological, we understand that. It's psychological, it's like the exterior and the interior, the exterior and the interior, and all its complexity. But at the same time, I believe it's our duty as sociologists to provide the sociological take, even though it's social psychology, of course it is. We cannot run from social psychology. People try to, but we cannot never. And my question is now, I don't know if you heard, but there are some biologists working with the sociology of animals, right? Which would be the same as animal bonding or animal conducts. You know, how dogs sniff each other, or how cats hate each other, or how rabbits, I don't know, they make friends. I don't know what they're getting to, but it's interesting to conceive, at least theoretical, at least to conceive that all animals who act in group, they show some violence, even though it is for territory, even though it is for power. Perhaps it's during the mating season, perhaps, you know, I'm not talking about the human animal, I'm talking about the other animals. So my question is, if they have these social settings, other species also have social settings, you know, what would make this different between them and us? And then, of course, we have culture, we have sociology, we have the understanding, we have the reasoning, we have the people, you know, but it's interesting to play with this. I'm not saying for you to put on your thesis, please don't. But it's interesting to play with this and to consider this as factors that humans have and non-humans don't, you know. So this is, I don't know, this came up to me. And nice to meet you.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Well, it's 5:25. Ojonimi, just for you to know, right after the presentations, we have some time in order to chat. You can open your mic. We can talk about the Research Committee 36. I don't know, do you know ISA? Are you already ISA member?
No, this was my first, me submitting my abstract here was my first time actually navigating through the website. So I didn't really know much about it so far.
No worries, no worries. You can always count on us. We do this every month. Next session is, let me just open here the calendar. I believe it's Nikki, the girl that was here. Let me check. And right after here, oh yes, here it is. Yes, Dickie Exum. She is going to talk about fashion in sociology and alienation, which is truly interesting. So this video is going to be available today.
Excuse me, what's the date on the next meeting?
Okay, I'll let you know. It's November 29. Let me put it here in the chat. And look at, there are more people. Of course, we understand that those people who are like in Tokyo or in California or in Alaska, perhaps they are very... Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dirk. It's on the 29th. For you, Andrew, is going to be 3 p.m. on November 29, 3 p.m. It's very hard to combine all this time schedule. I mean, right now in Moscow, I don't know, it must be, what time is it there, Olga?
Now or
Now.
now it's a 11:30 p.m.
11:30.
Yeah.
Have you dined already?
Right.
Eating your
Yeah.
dinner?
Yeah.
Oh my God, 11:30, I'm already sleeping so much. Oh my God, it's interesting. It's interesting. It was a lovely first session. I'm just so sorry more people couldn't come, but I'm sure we are going to get growing and get growing. It was very, very lovely meeting you, Ojonimi.
Same here, sir. It was really, I was not really sure of in terms of like how many people will be here. And like my first time, I was a bit nervous, but you guys all helped. I really
This is what I
appreciate
said.
being
This is
here.
a very a good place to test. We are all good people with very positive social bonds. We are not
And
problematic
it's,
at all. We just study sociology, but we are not, crazy. Not so much.
well, but it's a really good bunch of people where you can test yourself and discuss things. And it's also good. We have we are making conferences. We're going to conferences. So look at the homepage. Be getting a member. That is always the best. So you can get in touch with us. That's pretty good. And now it's the deadline is already over. So we have a conference next year in Morocco, and then 2 years afterwards in South Korea. But we also are going to have next year an online conference. So just if you like the idea, so just join. It's a fun group. It's a nice fun group, and it's intellectual, also very interesting, I think.
And we expect you can come the next sessions to comment, because it was very useful for me during my thesis, because with people's comments we can make our work better and see other insights that we hadn't seen before. Very good, very good. I believe we have come to the end of our session. I'm going to finish the recording.